Jesus Christ!
As I'm sure many of you have noticed, there has been a new movement in indie gaming. The PS1 revival era that we currently live in is peculiar as far as artistic movements go. While the surrealist, absurdist, and abstract movements of the early 1900s were all made as a rejection of what art was supposed to be, the PS1 revival is one defined by nostalgia, a longing for what was. I was born in 2007, meaning that by the time my brain had turned on, the era of 32-bit consoles had long seen its close. But even then, just looking at games from that time fills me with a sense of somber recollection, an emotion that can be alienating at times. However, every now and again, something will come into my life that lets me explore the strange sadness of the PSX era, and most recently, that thing has been Lost in Vivo. Lost in Vivo is a 2018 survival horror game made in this now ever-familiar 32-bit style. And given its initial release date, it is safe to say that it was one of the first games to bring PS1-era graphics back to life. Developed in Unity by independent game dev Kira, Lost in Vivo tells the story of an unnamed person who, amid a flash flood, dives down a storm drain in an attempt to rescue their service dog. Now, trapped below the surface, we, the protagonist, are required to retrieve our lost dog and escape the underground. The dev describes Lost in Vivo as a game about claustrophobia, and the environments we explore only further cement that idea. We traverse a huge variety of areas, from abandoned train stations to secret laboratories, but even with that assortment of locales, every area manages to feel suffocating, and this impressive environment makes you feel like you have stumbled into a world that is actively against your survival. Lost in Vivo takes heavy inspiration from Silent Hill, and oftentimes takes certain things from Silent Hill and implants them directly within its own gameplay. However, this is not a detriment to the experience as a whole, because while it pays homage to those games, it isn't trying to be Silent Hill. And this is most prevalent in the atmosphere. Where Silent Hill is a Twin Peaks Lynchian-style slow-burn horror, Lost in Vivo is far more... It takes a more abstract, symbolic approach to scare players. But just like Silent Hill, Lost in Vivo's story deals with trauma. After the storm spirits us away to the underground labyrinth that will comprise the rest of our journey, we come across a small camp.
There's not much on TV nowadays, so I thought I'd make my own show. I started putting food and rancid meat in the useless old box, and all sorts of little critters would come and play. It was really relaxing to just sit on the sofa and watch them eat, but the smaller critters started attracting larger ones to the show. Some horrid, putrid thing kept coming by to watch, so I would just pretend to be asleep till it passed, but I think it knows I'm awake. I think it's watching me, not the show on the TV.
This person has been living down here for God knows how long, but their paranoia shows the effect this underground has on a person, and their refusal to leave and march onward takes its toll.
My eyes are useless. All they do now is sting and show me stuff that can't be real. If that rancid thing wants them, then I say let it have them.
We can find this individual further along the path, but they are far too gone for us to help. Lashing out against us violently, in an act of self-defense, we kill the vagrant. As we continue on, eventually we come across a narrow pipe that leads deeper into the complex, and tagged right next to this metaphorical gateway, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." This is a clear reference to Dante's Inferno, and just like Dante, we are about to embark on our own personal hell, one made of tight spaces and twisted monstrosities. Fumbling our way deeper into the sewers in search of our dog, whose name is Danny by the way, we mysteriously acquire a handgun through a chain link fence and are led to the safe room, where a statue of an angel hangs over us. But upon leaving this calming space, we find ourselves not in the sewer, but an abandoned train station. After hailing the next train to take us deeper into the station, we see another unnerving figure aboard the train, along with Danny. hurriedly boarding the next car, we quickly confirm our suspicions that these trains have been out of use for years, maybe even decades. A handwritten note found on the train states the following.
I don't want to go. I just want to stay on this train. I want to stay in the dark where no one can see me. I'm sorry.
When we arrive, a pair of shoes stand by the platform's edge, a clear indicator as to what happened. We are now stuck here, and exploring this abandoned station reveals that not everything is in order.
I want to make a decision. I want to take control back in my life. I want to matter. Everyone just makes choices for me. Maybe I'll find someplace where I can be happy. Someplace dark without people to remind me how ugly I am.
This station has had trouble with its electricity cutting out intermittently in the past, and such an event happened to occur following our arrival. But after several encounters with the ghost of the girl hit by the train mere moments ago, we can reset the breaker and escape from the dilapidated space, seemingly setting her spirit free in the process. After boarding the train what the fuck? We are suddenly teleported to this new location somewhere deeper within the subway, but something isn't right here. We die several times trying to escape, but fortunately, seemingly, in an act of gratitude, the ghost woman from earlier prevents the train from hitting us moments before we meet our death. And wandering farther down the train track, we can escape the first level of our journey and descend further into the dark. Now finding ourselves within an abandoned mining operation, we begin looking for a way forward, and before long discover a door that requires 3 different seals to open, a clear nod to the Resident Evil puzzle style. But just like the subway before this, not everything is as it should be. Following a rather tense cat-and-mouse game between us and this twisted mimic, we open the sealed door and enter the Nazumi testing facility. A glance around the laboratory yields various notes of one Dr. Brundle.
Feeling good about today. Progress continues almost at an alarming rate, given how theoretical this all should be. Today we had one of the smaller rodents continue to move for almost 2 hours after all of its blood had been drained and replaced with mix PA22.12.15V. Today, I questioned the higher staff, just on how far they think we can go with these experiments. Dr. Piccanini took hold of me and brought me into one of the off-limits rooms and showed me something I don't fully understand. Maybe he was playing an elaborate and inappropriate prank. Piccanini told me it was his other pet project and assured me that the work we're doing is of great importance. Dr. Piccanini went crazy. He attacked me in the office, screaming about sacrifice. I hit him over the head, and he lost consciousness, but I confirmed he's still alive. I'm going to try and get out of here using the flood tunnels connected to the rat fluid chamber.
The rat men in this segment are seemingly the result of some of these sick experiments, now condemned to a life in this underground facility devoid of sanity. A retinal scanner blocks our way forward, but looking around the facility reveals that the rats inside have eaten all of the eyeballs that we could have used. However, when we find Dr. Piccanini's eyeless corpse, the retinal scanner door is now cracked open, and we can escape into the next area. This reunion with Danny is lovely, but extremely temporary, and after we open the next sealed door, a flood of the aforementioned rat experiment liquid flushes Danny down the floor drain, leaving us isolated once again. But luckily, we aren't alone for long.
I'm almost out of here, but Pickaninny's pet is in the warehouse by the emergency exit. It won't move while I'm staring at it, but when I try and look away, it seems to reappear somewhere within a closer radius. If someone finds this, please be careful, as the creature may still be around.
Sotiris, much like a certain peanut, is an entity only able to move when unobserved. Following several very tense chase sequences through the departments of the warehouse, we board a rusty elevator, and after this last challenge in facing our fears, the end credits roll and we are delivered back to the surface. Much like all small victories in this game, our glimmer of hope fades away moments later, as in a final act of spite and malice, Sotiris sabotages the elevator and sends us cascading down to the bottommost floor of the sewers. After a short while of regaining our sense of direction, we eventually stumble across our brain.
What are you hoping to accomplish? Without me, you're just hollow. You're pathetic. You need fear to motivate you.
During this section, the same strange figure we saw aboard the train at the start summons a deformed entity known as the Siren. After 3 different battles with the Siren, we continue onward into the darkness. The real final challenge culminates in an amalgamation of all the things we've confronted so far. Armed to the teeth, we hack and slash our way through hordes of enemies as reality falls apart around us, and after squeezing through the tightest, most claustrophobic corridor in the game, the light from the surface manifests, and we are permitted to leave, finally reuniting with Danny on the surface.
You escape the confines of the sewer and reunite with your dog. You feel that your experience has changed who you are, and that the barriers of life that once restricted and intimidated you have now fallen away. You've been to hell and back, confronted your fears, and gotten stronger.
Unsurprisingly, Lost in Vivo is a game with a lot of secrets. The one it guards closest being what actually happens during the game. While the game presents the journey we go on as a literal one, there are more than a couple of points at which cracks start to show. These occurrences are few and far between, but nonetheless they do exist, and as the story continues, they become more and more frequent, reality itself shattering around us and acting as a not-so-subtle hint that these events never actually happened. Ultimately, I feel that the true nature of the events we see in-game is revealed through the title alone. Lost in Vivo is a double entendre. In vivo simply means to be inside of a living thing, so to be lost in vivo can be interpreted as us being lost inside an environment that is itself alive, comparing our journey to being swallowed whole. But there is another interpretation. In vivo, better known as exposure therapy, is a process in which patients are exposed to their phobias a little bit at a time, eventually reaching a stage of normalization, in which they have complete control over their fears. A short cutscene at the start of the game reveals that our main character has been seeing a therapist, and I find their conversation to be incredibly enlightening.
So how are you feeling? Do you feel these sessions are still helping? We could try something a little more direct. We could start in vivo exposure therapy.
Lost in Vivo is a game about overcoming fear, and in the case of our protagonist, claustrophobia. The underground we explore, while disturbing, is only metaphorical, but that doesn't mean the character we play as is any less afraid. Fortunately, much like Dante, we have a guide of our own. After beating the game, if you go to the options screen and turn your gamma to the highest setting, then hit continue, you are taken to the Gallery of Light, a sort of extras menu where we can see all the models and names of every enemy in the game. And scooting over to the strange figure that stalks our movements throughout the story reveals that both he and the angel statue are referred to as Virgil. Now, I don't think that Lost in Vivo is supposed to be an allegory for the Divine Comedy, but it certainly pays homage to it. Reading the notes found in the first half of the story depicts a traumatized woman insecure in her appearance and trapped in a toxic relationship, an idea further reinforced by the conversation we have with our therapist after meeting our end at the hands of a giant leech monster.
So, how are you feeling?
I feel like everyone hates me, and I hate myself.
Your sense of worth is too influenced by body shape and weight. You don't judge others so harshly. You have worth, you have beauty, but you're unable to see it. Your vision of yourself is distorted.
Then how should I fix it? If I can't fix my body, then how do I fix my vision of myself?
We're working together to fix it. But I will also write you a refill for your fluoxetine.
These notes on the subway appear to be ours, and they provide a huge medium in which we can understand the story Lost in Vivo is trying to tell.
He's so nice. I feel like I matter again. He makes me feel real. He tells me that I matter. He doesn't think I'm so ugly. He makes me feel so much better sometimes, but I worry that I'm not good enough. He wants me to lose weight, and I'm really trying, but it's just so difficult. I look in the mirror and nothing's changed. I don't know what to write. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. I'm not sure if I'm happy or sad, but I think we're going to have a child. All he talks about is how ugly I've become, how ugly I'm going to be. He tells me he's leaving. I feel so sick. He hates me now. And I have all this responsibility, all because of this parasite inside me. I didn't think this would happen. I just did what I was told. I wanted him to be happy with me.
Placed within the allegory of the Divine Comedy, our therapist is Virgil, a comforting guide through the hell we explore. And while Virgil is far more present in Dante's hell, ours is very passive, acting more like a small comfort from the trauma represented in the sewers. Plastered across nearly every wall in the subway are posters alluding to our protagonist's self-image problems. Posters saying things like, how to stop eating and you should lose weight are found everywhere. And in what is probably my favorite sequence in the game, we are forced to pick between a series of two corridors. One with the ideal depiction of a woman on it, and one with a strange abstract blob. Picking the doors with the ideal depictions grant us nothing but hordes of enemies, leeches and mirrors, and other things that drain us of our strength and confidence. But should we travel the other corridor, instead of being met with reminders of our insecurity, we're given a calming atmosphere and extra ammunition, undoubtedly priceless resources for the problems ahead. The real trial comes when we make our way through to the next segment of the puzzle, a room containing an apple, a toilet, and a set of bars that block our way forward should we choose to eat. Seemingly, the only way to move onward is either to avoid eating or to vomit. Complying with this logic, the only thing we are met with is a swift death at the hands of the leech monster from before. But if we examine the bars closer, they aren't solid like the other barricades in game. They change and warp with your movements because they aren't real. You can walk right through them, and if we make it through to the other side, conquering our guilt and insecurity, we're met with a disturbing scene. This manifestation of our protagonist's child, who presumably miscarried due to her eating disorder, lies screaming on the changing table. However, instead of being disgusted or repulsed by the entity, we choose to take it with us, keeping it in our memories, but letting go of the trauma that we associate with it. Hey guys, this is Editing Callan here. I just want to clarify, I actually don't think that the baby miscarried. I'm 99% sure that the implication is that our character self-aborted it using a knife in the restroom, as seen by this wonderful image here. Yeah, that's it. It doesn't change the actual events of the story that much, it just makes the whole implication of what actually happened to our character's pregnancy a lot darker. And, yeah, that's it. Back to the video. From this point forward, the game doesn't allude to our character's past at all. It only gives us small bits and pieces to satisfy the gaps left in the story, but bits and pieces are still enough to go off of. Throughout the game, we can find several lost tapes hidden in the environment. In these bizarre, disturbing tapes, we can take a small peek at some of our character's past trauma, and maybe, just maybe, gain a slightly deeper understanding of what she's been through. We start with this tape in our inventory, and upon making it to our first tape player, inserting the tape reveals our character inside a dark, decrepit building. Crawling around, we are confronted by these somehow living decapitated heads of dogs locked behind decaying steel bars. The sound design in this tape is fantastic, making you feel overstimulated in this already tensile environment, but after not too long of walking around, we can find a small, curled-up dog who resembles Danny behind a flimsy chain-link fence, easily ripped down by a pair of bolt cutters. The end of the recording sees us leaving the building with the dog in our arms. This tape depicts our protagonist saving Danny from a rescue shelter, overwhelmed and overstimulated by the chaos around her, but still going through it for the sake of her dog. This exposes the mental state of our protagonist by the start of the game, showing us the way our prospective character sees the world around her. But more than anything, I feel this tape is supposed to demonstrate how much the protagonist loves Danny, serving as a motivator for the undoubtedly hard journey ahead. Kind of like saying, we've rescued this dog once, we can do it again. Tape 2 takes place in an empty but not deserted hospital. Searching around the defunct building reveals these weird glitch or ghost things. I don't really know what they are, but approaching them reveals lines of dialogue like, This tape is primarily just a walkthrough of what is most possibly a mental hospital, but whether we are admitted to this hospital or just visiting for an exposure therapy session isn't made clear. By the end of the tape, we fall down a chute into a room of humanoids wandering in a pitch-black void, and as they stumble around us, moaning and groaning with sounds of pain, the tape ends. I think this tape is trying to show us how the protagonist feels about her therapy. There's a lot of stigma around seeking help for mental health issues, especially when this game was being made. Much of it probably internalized by our main character. And the depiction of the hospital that we get to see can imply how our protagonist feels about it, seeing it as a thing for the stereotypical crazy person. And during these visits, she feels out of place, a factor that is most likely contributing to her rapidly declining mental health. Tape 3 sees us sauntering about an old cabin with no particular goal in mind. When we step outside into the pouring rain, we receive a brief cutscene of something inhuman trekking through the woods, presumably towards us. Left with nothing else to do, we can interact with more of these spirit beings that say things like, And more disturbingly, examining the rotting structure reveals some occult themes within: a chapel in the attic containing said idol, and strange pictures, such as this, hung up on the wall. Receiving our instruction to destroy the idol, we locate a stove, a box of matches, and firewood before returning upstairs for the idol. Ultimately, we set it ablaze, and as we do, the tape cuts to black. Tape 3 paints the picture of an intensely religious household suffering from its faith. Assuming we are still working with the idea that these tapes are memories of our main character, this one suggests that the household she grew up in was an extreme, potentially even abusive religious family. Maybe the burning of the idol symbolizes her loss of faith and acts as a catalyst for the attempted escape that follows. Our fourth and final tape sees our character checking into a sinister motel, presumably in the middle of nowhere. Rooms with mysterious occupants, beds covered in soot and decay, and a room with ritualistic candles glowing in the bathroom. Here in this room, we once again see the Inferno, this time in the form of an old movie playing on the television. Finally, after minutes of searching, we can acquire a bed free of insects, dirt, or another person, and soon thereafter, we fall asleep. Forced to look for a place to sleep, we notice some things in the motel have changed. Strange footsteps echo in the mold-dense carpeted halls, voices are heard behind doors, and something unusual spins in the washing machine. Nonetheless, after we are once again evicted by a swarm of maggots, we find a measly chair to doze off in. The hotel is now swarming with insects and rot. The thing in the washing machine is revealed to be the corpse of a dead rodent, and somebody, or something, waits for us in the main lobby. This tape is a bit harder to interpret than the other three. However, we can make out some context clues. Whoever this is supposed to be is not a pleasant sight for our character, maybe representing a dad, brother, mother, uncle, grandparent, or whoever, but as I said, our character is terrified of them, potentially even implying that the protagonist has come to this hotel in a deliberate attempt to escape them. But as we see, she is ultimately unsuccessful. These tapes are terrifying to me, not only because the scenes that they depict are objectively scary, but because it gives us a window into what our character lives like. This is how they perceive reality, other people. It's horrifically sad. This type of abstraction is something seen across the whole game, the siren being a wonderful example. Its name implies that it represents a false hope, something so beautiful that by the time we realize it's wrong, it's already too late. Connecting that to the fleshy goblin creature inside of its head, locating it in the gallery tells us that it's called childhood memories. Whatever that's supposed to mean is entirely up for interpretation, but it makes me call even more into question. What is Sotiris meant to be? We find the third lost tape in its area, and Dr. Piccanini's notes stating that he watched the tape, but if the tapes are items representing our character's corrupted memories, then why did the tape cause the doctor to make Sotiris shortly thereafter? Does Sotiris represent religious trauma? Well, okay, now that I'm thinking about it, there was a flyer at the start of the game talking about Dr. Brundle's escape from Nazumi testing. Is Sotiris supposed to be real? Well, Then wait, if Sotiris is real, does that mean the girl in the train station is the same missing girl from the flyer on the surface? What is she supposed to represent? Are the notes we find around the subway ours or hers? Is this trying to imply that our experience in the sewers is at least somewhat real? Well then why does reality freak out at so many points, deleting items or entire areas, showing error messages, manipulating credit sequences, bringing us back to life, or teleporting us to completely different areas in the game? In the end, I'm not even convinced of my own interpretation. There are a lot of conflicting theories, evidences, and more than either of those two, things that just don't satisfyingly fit into any particular narrative. This game is riddled with secrets. I didn't even mention most of them in this video. Much like the games it's trying to emulate, Lost in Vivo lacks any definitive conclusion, existing with 4 different contrasting endings that are all completely divergent from one another. And while I believe that the true ending sees our protagonist overcoming her trauma and making it through her in vivo therapy, that conclusion is in no way concrete. This intentional decision to keep things vague is something that I appreciate so much. There are so many times in media where you will have a genuinely intriguing mystery, one with twists and turns, mountains of conflicting evidence, and themes that lie outside of the puzzle in question, only for it all to be ruined when the creator just gives it away. This entire video is one long way of saying that Lost in Vivo is among the best horror games I have ever played, and what makes it stand out is the way that it uses its aesthetics to manipulate the player's feelings. This PS1 art style is something that the indie gaming scene has latched onto, and I honestly don't foresee it being let go anytime soon. Why we as a community have latched onto an aesthetic that attempts to transport us back in time to the early 2000s is a matter for people much more empathetic than I to discuss. However, Lost in Vivo makes the deliberate choice to connect this nostalgia with trauma, and it's a connection that makes perfect sense. Trauma is the complete and utter corruption of a time or experience that we loved, now tainted with rust and decay. Lost in Vivo understands this, internalizes it, and then uses that same emotion to provide an experience that scares me to my very core. I did a second, third, fourth, and fifth playthrough of the game to gather footage for this video, and every single playthrough brought me new terrors in ways I didn't know a game could. I love games like Resident Evil, Amnesia, Silent Hill, Dead Space, anything in survival horror, and when I'm playing those games, I can dissociate from them. I understand that I'm a person outside of the story, but despite the screen jitter and bit crunch sound effects, I feel like I'm there when I play Lost in Vivo. The sewers have this remarkable ability to pull me in, and unlike other horror games, I never feel safe. But Lost in Vivo does so much more than scare you. By moving forward, refusing to give up, and overcoming the monsters in the dark, we grow along with our protagonist. We are the light inside of our protagonist's head, pushing her along the path of recovery, and by the end of it all, our efforts are rewarded, reuniting with Danny on the surface. It's a game that shows us that we can grow. We can move past trauma and grief and guilt and pain, but it's a choice that you have to make. Along the way, there will be obstacles, false hope, and people who perceive your weakness as a point to manipulate you. But there will also be those who are willing to guide you, comfort you. People who want to see you succeed and ferry you into the light. And while it might hurt, and while it might be torture akin to traversing the depths of hell, you aren't alone. And the fact that a game from 2018, made possible by a small team of artists and $5,000, can express all of that in slightly under 5 hours of gameplay is something so incredibly remarkable.
I waited in the dark for so long. I lashed out against anyone who got close. But someone kept pushing me into the light. It hurt me for a while. It doesn't hurt anymore.